it is often overlooked that there are anomalous lacunae within the timeline of human civilization. Entire centuries have seemingly vanished from European records, leaving no documented events or discernible traces. Furthermore, some ancient civilizations demonstrably possessed profound knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and mathematics, capabilities far exceeding what their historical period would suggest. Yet, these achievements are scarcely acknowledged in conventional academic texts. This raises a fundamental inquiry. Who determines what is preserved in collective memory and what is consigned to oblivion? The undeniable truth is that powerful entities have consistently influenced and shaped the collective consciousness of humanity. They have systematically engaged in the burning of books, the suppression of knowledge, dissemination, and the destruction of libraries. Such actions were not born of ignorance, but rather from a profound understanding that knowledge confers power. The control of memory dictates the present, and by mastering the present, one invariably molds the future. Consequently, what is presented to us today as history is, in many instances, a meticulously curated narrative, a story that has been edited, revised, and occasionally entirely rewritten. The deeper truths remain concealed beneath layers of forgotten time, hidden in ancient ruins, sequestered in forbidden manuscripts, and perhaps residing within the recesses of our own subconscious, an innate sense that certain elements of our past feel incomplete, a feeling we have seldom been encouraged to question. Should one resonate with this intuitive apprehension that the historical record is flawed, one is poised to delve into these forgotten mysteries. The most potent truths are often those deliberately obscured, yet they persistently await rediscovery. When contemplating history, a common perception is that of a continuous, linear progression, akin to an unbroken film, unspooling from antiquity to the contemporary era. However, a closer examination reveals profound anomalies, silent gaps. These periods exhibit an absence of significant architectural construction, remarkable technological innovations, or reliable historical documentation, merely an expansive void. Curiously, this emptiness is often disregarded, as if nothing exceptional occurred. One of the most perplexing of these discontinuities is the so-called missing century, spanning from 614 to 714 AD. This 100-year interval has left virtually no historical footprint. Few events were recorded, and there is a conspicuous lack of discernible developments in art, architecture, philosophy, or political structures. Even the emperors purported to have reigned during this period, if mentioned at all, are linked to vague and unsubstantiated timelines. A controversial hypothesis, known as the phantom time hypothesis, proposes that this entire era may have been deliberately fabricated and inserted into the historical record by powerful figures of the time. Proponents suggest that Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II may have manipulated the calendar to establish the year 1000 AD as a symbolically significant milestone, thus legitimizing the rise of a divinely ordained empire. If validated, this theory would imply that humanity operates within a fundamentally altered historical timeline. While not officially recognized by mainstream historians, this proposition raises a pertinent question that warrants serious consideration. Why do extended periods of human history appear to be absent from the record? These historical lacunae are not confined to the 7th century. Across ancient civilizations in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, there are stretches of hundreds of years for which maps, administrative records, or newly discovered architecture are conspicuously absent. It is as though an entire epoch has been deliberately obscured. If one posits that such gaps are merely the result of records decaying over time, then the fate of the Library of Alexandria provides a compelling counterexample. Once revered as the preeminent center of knowledge in the ancient world, it housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts from a vast array of civilizations, not only Greek works, but also Egyptian, Persian, Indian, Chinese, and even long-lost texts from Mesopotamia. It served as a global nexus where scholars converged to share and preserve wisdom. Yet, this unparalleled repository was consumed by fire. The exact perpetrators remain debated. Some attribute responsibility to Caesar's army, others to religious zealots, while still others suggest its destruction occurred over centuries as part of a systematic endeavor to eradicate knowledge deemed uncontrollable. The more profound inquiry, however, is the motivation behind the burning of books. If knowledge is enlightenment, why extinguish its flame? If a library safeguards the past, why incinerate memory? It was not because these manuscripts contained falsehoods, but precisely because they challenged the established narrative that certain powers wished to promulgate. A blank space in the historical record is rarely a mere oversight. It can be the consequence of a deliberate act. The burning of a library, the prohibition of documentation, or the erasure of an entire civilization from the historical map may leave no physical scars of battle, but they inflict deep and lasting wounds upon the collective memory of humankind. If entire centuries can vanish, it compels us to consider how many other memories remain intentionally concealed. When engaging with any historical text, there is an inherent tendency to assume its veracity. However, truth, much like light, only manifests where an individual or institution chooses to illuminate a specific narrative. History, fundamentally, is not independent of power. From the very inception of written language, those who wielded the pen also commanded the authority to shape memory. Consequently, the essential question has never solely been what happened, but rather who authored this account and what did they intend for us to remember. For millennia, power and knowledge were inextricably linked, often for the purpose of retention rather than widespread dissemination. Empires, whether Eastern or Western, shared a common characteristic. They meticulously recorded only that which served their survival and ideological consolidation. A military defeat was recharacterized as a strategic withdrawal. A provincial rebellion was denounced as an insurrection. A more advanced rival civilization was dismissed as barbaric and subsequently expunged from the historical consciousness. Religion, too, frequently served as a formidable gatekeeper of knowledge. Books were not incinerated because they were perceived as meaningless, but because they contained ideas that directly challenged established doctrine. Throughout the medieval centuries, only texts approved by the ecclesiastical authorities were permitted to circulate. Any dissenting thought, even a simple inquiry, was branded as heresy. As the world transitioned into modernity, the filtering, categorization, and control of knowledge persisted, albeit through more subtle systemic means: the educational system, the academic establishment, the publishing industry, and research funding mechanisms. Each of these systems establishes its own criteria for what is deemed scientific, reliable, or valuable. Anything outside this prescribed framework is often relegated to a marginalized category, dismissed as lacking evidence, credibility, or merit. However, a critical question remains largely unaddressed. Who establishes these standards, and why are we so often discouraged from scrutinizing them? Students are taught from curricula meticulously drafted by committees, which in turn are approved by national education systems. This cyclical process perpetuates what can be termed a curated memory, not necessarily because of active deception, but because the entire edifice permits only that which aligns with the pre-existing narrative. Consequently, elements that do not conform are not overtly rejected, they are simply ignored. There is no debate, no rebuttal, merely silence. And as history demonstrates, that which is never spoken of slowly ceases to exist, much like an unnamed room within a familiar structure. This compels us to ask, do subsequent generations possess the right to reopen these doors? Do we dare to inquire whether we are engaging with objective history, or merely a sanctioned version? And if a memory has been systematically erased, who possesses the authority to decree its forgotten status? One might examine antique maps and encounter an unfamiliar name, Tartaria, which once encompassed a significant portion of northern Eurasia. On numerous European maps from the 16th to 18th centuries, Tartaria is distinctly delineated, extending from Russia's eastern frontiers to the borders of China and deep into Central Asia. It was not a nebulous frontier or unexplored wilderness. It possessed defined borders, cities, territorial divisions, and a populace. Why then is this entity virtually unknown today? Tartaria is conspicuously absent from school textbooks. There are no official lessons on its political systems, culture, or language. Major museums do not exhibit its artifacts. In the collective consciousness of most individuals, it simply never existed. Yet, the lingering traces of Tartaria are not as faint as one might assume. Across both Europe and Asia, architectural structures exhibit striking congruency in style, displaying technical features that appear to transcend the expected capabilities of their era. Massive stone columns, grand domes, arched windows, and even concealed electrical systems embedded within walls suggest remnants of a unified architectural logic neither random nor isolated. Indeed, many government buildings, museums, and train stations constructed during the 18th and 19th centuries in disparate nations share identical designs, proportions, and decorative motifs, despite lacking any apparent cultural connection. Some independent researchers posit that these structures are surviving relics of Tartaria, subsequently repurposed by later governments, their original functions altered, and new designations applied. Naturally, those who venture to inquire about Tartaria are often dismissed as purveyors of conspiracy theories. However, a pattern emerges. Whenever a civilization is labeled a myth, the avenue for genuine exploration is effectively sealed. Was Tartaria a veritable empire, or merely a broad geographic designation employed by early Europeans for unmapped territories? The answer remains elusive. Nevertheless, instead of pursuing comprehensive investigation, contemporary historiography has chosen to avert its gaze. No inquiry, no instruction, no debate, merely deletion. Tartaria is not an isolated case. Should one inquire about the northern Mesopotamian cultures, the Andean civilizations preceding the Inca, or the medieval African kingdoms that engaged in trade with Arabia and India, one is often met with blank incomprehension. This is not due to a lack of interest among younger generations, but because these narratives have simply not been imparted. Over time, that which remains unspoken begins to dissolve from existence. A civilization absent from textbooks gradually recedes from collective memory. Yet, human memory is not as easily effaced as a curriculum entry. It leaves behind lacunae, vague intuitions, unarticulated questions, and occasionally, that quiet resonance of having seen this somewhere before, a potent signal that a segment of history awaits its rediscovery. Perhaps no name in ancient history incites more scholarly debate than Atlantis. Described as a city of concentric circles, interlaced with canals, possessing advanced defensive systems, abundant resources, and architecture far ahead of its time, this flourishing society purportedly vanished in a single cataclysmic day, leaving no discernible trace. The primary accounts of Atlantis originate from Plato's renowned dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, composed around 360 BCE. Plato depicted Atlantis as a formidable civilization that challenged ancient Athens before being swallowed by the sea in a singular day and night of misfortune. Many scholars promptly assert that Plato was a philosopher, not a historian, suggesting he employed Atlantis as an allegory, a cautionary tale regarding moral decay and unchecked power. However, if this were merely a symbolic narrative, why does the account contain such a wealth of technical details? Plato did not merely describe Atlantis abstractly. He meticulously provided the proportions of its rings, the width of its canals, and the metals utilized, including a mysterious substance called orichalcum. This metal was long considered mythical until a similar alloy was recently discovered in a sunken ship off the coast of Sicily, raising a disquieting inquiry. What if Plato was recounting historical fact? And if so, why has the prevailing global consensus insisted on its classification as a myth? Similar to Tartaria, once a narrative is relegated to the category of legend, it ceases to be treated as a subject worthy of serious investigation, transforming into a bedtime story rather than a historical lead. This categorization, however, does not preclude its reality. Over the past century, countless theories have been advanced regarding the true location of Atlantis off the coast of Gibraltar, beneath the Caribbean Sea, even in Antarctica or the Sahara Desert. Each proposed site presents a degree of corroborating evidence alongside an equal measure of counter-arguments. The peculiar aspect is that as more evidence surfaces, the narrative of Atlantis appears to be pushed further into the realm of myth. Why this paradoxical resistance? Perhaps if Atlantis did exist, and if it indeed possessed knowledge beyond its era, the origins of human civilization might not commence in Mesopotamia or Egypt, as currently taught. This would necessitate a fundamental re-evaluation of the entire historical timeline. Such a paradigm shift is not readily accepted by all, as history is not merely a chronicle of the past. It forms the bedrock of our worldview, defining our concepts of progress, science, and civilization. If a prior, advanced civilization existed and subsequently disappeared, it challenges our perception of contemporary humanity, standing at an evolutionary apex. This potential intellectual upheaval may be precisely why Atlantis has been interred, not solely beneath the waves, but beneath layers of deliberate doubt. While no overt prohibition exists against researching Atlantis, academic warnings against taking legends too seriously effectively stifle further inquiry. If history is an incomplete puzzle, then perhaps the narratives we dismiss as legends are, in fact, the crucial missing pieces. Among all ancient civilizations referenced in academic curricula, Egypt consistently maintains prominence. The imagery of pharaohs, pyramids, the Sphinx, and the Nile River is deeply embedded in the global consciousness. Yet, a curious dichotomy exists. The more we are taught about Egypt, the less we appear to genuinely comprehend what transpired. This is largely because the historical discourse is encapsulated within a fixed narrative, portraying ancient Egyptians as industrious agriculturalists who incrementally built an empire through sustained labor. However, a rigorous examination of their monumental legacy causes this theory to falter. Consider the pyramids of Giza, 3 colossal structures in the desert, each constructed from multi-ton stone blocks, stacked with millimeter precision and without mortar. Their angles are near perfect, aligning closely with Earth's axial tilt. The base of the Great Pyramid of Giza aligns almost precisely with the planet's prime meridian, with a margin of error under 0.05 degrees. Furthermore, the layout of the pyramids reflects the positions of the 3 stars in the Orion constellation with astonishing accuracy. To dismiss this as mere coincidence requires considerable credulity, especially given that contemporary engineers, utilizing cranes, heavy-duty trucks, and laser-guided positioning systems, cannot replicate the precision achieved by these so-called ancient farmers millennia ago. A discrepancy clearly exists. Many independent researchers have posed a pertinent inquiry. Did the ancient Egyptians actually construct the pyramids, or were they merely the inheritors of pre-existing structures? There is no record whatsoever in ancient Egyptian texts describing the construction of the Great Pyramid. No blueprints, no discernible tools left behind, no documents naming an architect. This towering edifice, now one of Earth's most iconic, remains entirely anonymous in its origin. This is merely one example. The ancient Egyptians possessed astronomical knowledge far exceeding their era. They understood Earth's axial tilt, meticulously tracked the Sirius star cycle, and calculated the length of the year with a margin of error under 0.25 days. A level of precision modern science only recently corroborated with advanced technology. They practiced sound-based healing, performed mummification using chemical compounds that remain unreplicated today, and carved granite, a material harder than iron, with methods that defy current explanation. Why then are these facts not routinely taught in standard history classes? Why are serious questions regarding the extent of Egyptian knowledge frequently dismissed as fringe speculation? It is plausible that acknowledging their possession of advanced technology would necessitate a fundamental reevaluation of the entire arc of human evolution. Such timeless knowledge potentially disrupts the neat, linear narrative of humanity's gradual ascent from savagery to civilization. And, more importantly, if such profound knowledge once existed, who imparted it? The ancient Egyptians consistently spoke of gods who instructed them in building, healing, agriculture, and astronomy. Yet, in modern interpretations, these accounts are often relegated to mere mythology, overlooking the possibility that these gods may have been symbolic representations of a prehistoric civilization that vanished without a trace. Egypt did not attempt to conceal its history. It meticulously carved everything in stone for future generations. However, those who subsequently retold the story chose to relate only a fraction of it. The untold part, preserved in silence, may well hold the key to revelations we have scarcely dared to imagine. Major technological advancements are frequently attributed exclusively to the modern world, founded on the assumption that contemporary humanity alone possesses the requisite tools and knowledge to construct magnificent wonders. However, a dispassionate analysis of certain ancient structures reveals an unsettling truth. They do not align with the established timeline of human evolution. They appear as artifacts from a future epoch, anachronistically placed in the distant past. Returning to the familiar pyramids of Giza, these geometric, astronomical, and engineering marvels have endured for millennia without collapse. To this day, no one has succeeded in replicating their construction using presumed ancient methods, and no explicit Egyptian record elucidates their building process. Moving beyond the deserts of Egypt, across the ocean to South America, one encounters Puma Punku, an astonishing and largely unacknowledged complex nestled high in the Bolivian Andes, over 3,800 meters above sea level. Pumapunku consists of massive stone blocks, weighing hundreds of tons, cut with laser-like precision, featuring perfectly symmetrical H-shaped grooves. Some blocks interlock with such exactitude that they resemble components from a modern industrial assembly line. Yet, the site dates back over 1,000 years, to a period when Andean peoples reportedly did not even possess the wheel. The methodology for cutting granite and diorite stones harder than steel without hardened metal tools remains unknown, and remarkably, this fundamental question is almost entirely absent from historical texts. Further afield, in modern-day Turkey, lies Göbekli Tepe, a site that has compelled archaeologists to fundamentally revise the timeline of human architecture. Discovered in the 1990 seconds, Göbekli Tepe is over 11,000 years old, predating the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge. It features dozens of massive T-shaped stone pillars, each exceeding 5 meters in height, intricately carved with animal symbols. All this was constructed at a time when, according to mainstream historical accounts, humans were still nomadic hunter-gatherers dwelling in caves, with no concept of organized religion or permanent temples. The identity of Göbekli Tepe's builders remains unknown. Consequently, the site is often categorized as an enigmatic anomaly, acknowledged but not permitted to disrupt the official historical narrative. When these three sites, the pyramids of Egypt, Pumapunku, and Göbekli Tepe, are considered collectively, a singular conclusion emerges. They defy the linear progression of technological development we have been taught. They exhibit advanced technology for their respective eras, provide no clear record of their constructors, involve no known tools capable of the precision observed, and do not align with the assumed level of civilization for their time. Perhaps most tellingly, their extraordinary nature is consistently downplayed in official explanations. To admit that advanced civilizations existed long before our modern age would necessitate a radical rethinking of human history, suggesting not a straight line of progress, but perhaps a cyclical pattern of ascent, collapse, rebuilding, and subsequent forgetting. Instead of confronting this possibility, the prevailing system often chooses to avert its gaze, labeling such phenomena as unexplained or mythological, thereby preserving the illusion that history is a settled domain. Yet, with every uncut stone, every unreplicated structure, every monument whose assigned age defies logic, there echoes a quiet assertion: an entire chapter of our own story remains unread. The Vatican is often revered as a global symbol of faith, the epicenter of Roman Catholicism, and a sacred locus of profound spiritual influence. However, a seldom explored facet reveals it as home to one of humanity's most extensive and secretive repositories of knowledge. Shielded behind the fortified portals of the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly known as the Vatican Secret Archive, lie over 85 kilometers of shelving. These shelves are laden with millions of documents, letters, maps, ancient manuscripts, diplomatic records, and historical writings, some dating back to the 8th century. Among these are handwritten letters from luminaries like Michelangelo and Galileo, edicts condemning heresy, ancient astronomical texts, and even records from the Roman Empire prior to its dissolution. Crucially, the vast majority of this collection is inaccessible to individuals outside the Vatican. Only a select few scholars are granted restricted access to very limited sections for brief periods, always under strict supervision. Photography is prohibited, documents may not leave the premises, and profound inquiries are subtly discouraged. This stringent control raises a pertinent inquiry. Why does a religious institution maintain such immense collections of global historical knowledge? And more importantly, why is it guarded with such unparalleled secrecy? The explanation, as often proves to be the case, transcends purely religious motivations. It is fundamentally about the power of knowledge. For centuries, the Vatican has functioned as a formidable gatekeeper of information. When ancient scientific discoveries contradicted ecclesiastical doctrine, they were labeled heresy. Pagan texts challenging religious order were incinerated. Cosmic theories threatening the geocentric model led to the condemnation of their proponents, such as Giordano Bruno, who was burned at the stake in 1600 for positing an infinite universe replete with countless worlds. While the Vatican is not unique in its history of censorship, it stands as one of the oldest and most secretive institutions, possessing the capacity to shape humanity's recollection of its own past, not through overt prohibitions, but by meticulously dictating what is permitted to be known and what is not. In the contemporary world, where information appears ubiquitous, it is tempting to assume that secrets are an anachronism. However, the most profound secrets remain sequestered in archives accessible only to their designated guardians. This singular characteristic distinguishes the Vatican. It does not merely conceal truth, but wields the authority to determine which truths remain untold. Might these documents contain references to forgotten prehistoric civilizations? Could there be texts from Egypt, Babylon, or even Atlantis that the world has never encountered? Do ancient maps perhaps delineate lands that no longer exist or were never publicly acknowledged? The answers remain unknown, for confronting this immense repository means confronting an impenetrable barrier of closed doors. Once again, history emerges as a narrative exclusively controlled by those who hold the key. In a world where words serve as the primary vessel for humanity's collective memory, knowledge, and aspirations, the act of burning books represents perhaps the most extreme assault on intelligence itself. It is poignant to reflect upon the sheer number of intellectual conflagrations throughout human history. From the Library of Alexandria to the destruction of Maya codices, from ancient Chinese classics to texts proscribed during the Renaissance, history is replete with instances where knowledge was deemed dangerous and consequently annihilated. One of the most devastating intellectual tragedies ever recorded is the burning of the Library of Alexandria. Once acclaimed as the greatest center of knowledge in the ancient world, it housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts spanning mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, medicine, and radical ideas that, had they survived, might have fundamentally reshaped civilization. Yet, almost all of it was lost due to war, rebellion, and neglect. The precise instigators of the fire remain disputed. Some implicate Julius Caesar, others Roman generals, religious authorities, or a protracted series of destructive events over centuries. What is certain, however, is the permanence of this loss. This phenomenon was not confined to Egypt. In the Americas, upon the arrival of the Spanish in Maya lands, they encountered a culture possessing its own sophisticated script, calendar, and a remarkably precise body of astronomical knowledge. Yet, within a few short years, the majority of Maya codices were incinerated, condemned as heresy. Father Diego de Landa, an early European chronicler of the Maya, personally ordered the destruction of hundreds of sacred texts, later lamenting that no one could subsequently comprehend the Maya, an irony that constitutes one of history's deepest tragedies. In Asia, during the reign of Qin Shi Huang in ancient China, a state-sanctioned book burning and scholar purge occurred in the name of ideological unity. Approximately 460 scholars were executed, and books from rival schools of thought were destroyed. Any knowledge, philosophical, medical, astronomical, that did not align with the empire's doctrine was systematically eradicated. However, the censorship of knowledge did not cease in ancient times. During the Renaissance, as thinkers began to challenge the prevailing ecclesiastical version of truth, an infamous index emerged, the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. This list included names now revered, such as Galileo, Copernicus, Spinoza, and Descartes, whose works were once branded as perilous to human faith and soul. Even more peculiar, some books were never burned, but instead concealed or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. An ancient manuscript detailing anti-gravity architecture from the Greek era vanished. A map depicting an ice-free Antarctica disappeared. Legends of flying machines in ancient Indian texts were dismissed without investigation. All such accounts hover at the blurry frontier between myth and reality, relegated to the shadows through collective silence. In a world where information is power, the choice of what is preserved and what is incinerated is never accidental. It is a deliberate decision regarding what humanity is permitted to remember and what it is compelled to forget. While the full extent of what was lost may never be known, one truth is undeniable. The history of humankind was not only inscribed in ink, but also erased by fire. The progression of modern science is frequently characterized as a linear ascent from ignorance to enlightenment, from superstition to rational inquiry. Yet, a closer examination of this trajectory reveals intriguing discrepancies. Numerous forms of ancient knowledge were discarded, not because they were demonstrably false, but because they failed to conform to the dominant worldview of their respective eras. Whenever a concept is labeled heretical or superstitious, the underlying motivation is often less about logical rigor and more about the exercise of power. Consider, for example, traditional medicine. Long before the advent of modern pharmacology, ancient civilizations in India, Egypt, China, and Greece developed sophisticated healing systems, often far exceeding what we typically associate with their epochs. Egyptians employed sound frequencies for therapeutic purposes. Ancient Indian texts describe intricate brain surgeries performed over 2 millennia ago, and the Chinese meticulously mapped energy meridians centuries before the invention of the microscope. However, with the rise of modern rational science, these practices were largely dismissed, lacking chemical formulas, microscopic validation, or quantifiable data. They were summarily branded as superstition. A similar pattern emerged in ancient astronomy. The Babylonians, Maya, and Egyptians all developed calendars of astonishing accuracy, some tracking stellar cycles, astronomical events, and Earth's axial tilt with a precision that modern science only recently confirmed with advanced technology. These ancient cultures relied upon observation, intuition, and accumulated wisdom spanning centuries. Yet, with the dawn of modern cosmology, championed by figures like Copernicus and Galileo, this entire corpus of ancient knowledge was effectively shelved as myth. The crucial question of how these civilizations attained such accuracy was seldom posed. Their findings were simply dismissed because their methodologies were not recognized within the new scientific paradigm. Subsequently, knowledge pertaining to non-material energy concepts, ranging from life force to biofields, and psychic phenomena faced similar marginalization. If something could not be measured by prevailing instruments or empirically proven in a laboratory setting, it was deemed unscientific. Once again, valuable knowledge was pushed aside, not due to its inherent falsity, but because it did not conform to the established intellectual framework. The critical question then becomes, who defines this framework? For centuries, scientific development has not occurred in isolation. It has been shaped, and often influenced, by powerful institutions, the church, academic academies, governments, and corporate entities. Science was encouraged when it served exploration, but stifled when it dared to ask inconvenient questions. Galileo's heliocentric model led to his condemnation. Alchemists advocating the transmutation of lead into gold were derided as madmen, only for modern inorganic chemistry to demonstrate its theoretical possibility. Individuals claiming to heal through energy were dismissed as charlatans. The profound irony is that many ideas once branded as heresy are now embraced as cutting-edge science. The fundamental issue has rarely been the idea itself, but rather the authority to determine which ideas are permitted to exist. When ancient knowledge is buried, it is often supplanted by a form of knowledge that is more easily controlled, a knowledge that prioritizes production, warfare, and consumption over healing, connection, and a deeper understanding of human identity. Therefore, the inquiry extends beyond merely asking why ancient knowledge was discarded. It compels us to consider who ultimately benefits when humanity forgets what it once knew. When considering ancient civilizations, the prevalent imagery often conjures kings, empires, warriors, invasions, and rigidly defined hierarchies, almost invariably male-dominated. From pharaohs to emperors, popes, tsars, and supreme leaders, these titles reverberate through history, and nearly all are associated with men. However, by stepping back, far beyond the confines of official history, one begins to discern enigmatic artifacts, small stone statues, intricate carvings, and recurring symbols across the ancient world that depict the mother goddess. From the Venus of Willendorf in Europe to earth goddesses in Anatolia, and from the stone idols of the Indus Valley to the goddesses of the Maya, these representations emerge from a period preceding recorded civilization. They do not portray women as passive or fragile. Rather, they embody figures of immense power, creation, fertility, and cosmic presence, an image of the universe viewed through the lens of life, not domination. It is conceivable that prior to the establishment of societies founded on empires, hierarchies, and warfare, humanity may have lived under a different paradigm, a matriarchal structure where power was centered around the mother, and religion revolved around birth, nourishment, and connection, rather than conquest. This hypothesis is not vague or mythical. It is supported by the extensive research of numerous archaeologists, notably Marija Gimbutas, who described an era spanning thousands of years wherein communities existed peacefully, devoid of fortresses or weapons. with women at the core of both cultural and spiritual life. Suddenly, this model vanished from the official historical record. School curricula contain no chapters on peaceful female-led societies, no lessons on civilizations built upon harmony rather than domination, only the rise of patriarchal empires, ceaseless warfare, and male dynasties. The explanation may lie in a global power shift. When warrior nomadic tribes from the north swept across various regions, they introduced a new societal framework, a patriarchal model where the strongest governed and men dominated religious, military, and political spheres. To solidify this new worldview, the old one had to be eradicated. Goddesses were transformed into subordinate figures, Mother Earth was supplanted by Father Sky, and origin stories were rewritten. Instead of humanity being born of a goddess, it was molded from clay by an omnipotent male deity. Thus, new myths emerged, new religions ascended, history fundamentally shifted, and the feminine aspect of human memory was relegated, buried beneath symbols, metaphors, or simply dismissed as folklore. However, that which is silenced rarely truly disappears. It persists in the earth, in cave art, in symbols, and within our collective unconscious. Today, as contemporary society begins to scrutinize gender imbalances, these fragments of an ancient feminine civilization are resurfacing not to supplant patriarchal history, but to complete the mosaic of humanity. This enriched perspective encompasses not only war but also birth, not merely governance but also nurturing, not solely strength, but also profound connection, a history in which the mother once occupied the center of the universe. It is commonly asserted that history is written by the victors. Yet, few truly grasp the profound implications of this assertion. For when one side triumphs in conflict, it appropriates not merely the land, wealth, or populace, it seizes the prerogative to dictate the narrative. And that narrative, more often than not, bears scant resemblance to objective truth. Consider the global map. How many territories once belonged to entirely distinct cultures before they were conquered, assimilated, and subsequently expunged from historical accounts? The Celts, for instance, once spanned a significant portion of Europe, leaving behind megalithic temples, solar worship traditions, and ancient triple spiral symbols. However, with the expansion of the Roman Empire, they were branded as barbarians, their faith outlawed, their language suppressed, and their culture absorbed. Today, we delve into the grandeur of Rome, while the Celts are relegated to a mere historical footnote. Similarly, the indigenous peoples of North America, comprising millions of individuals across hundreds of tribes, languages, and extensive trade networks, possessed deep, nature-based belief systems for millennia. Upon the arrival of Europeans, their intricate societies were not recognized as civilizations, but rather labeled a wilderness, transforming the act of seizure into an act of discovery. Modern American history often commences not with the acknowledgement of pre-existing populations, but with the assertion of European arrival. The Aboriginal people of Australia inhabited that continent for over 60,000 years, representing the oldest known continuous culture on Earth. Yet, when the British arrived, they declared it times terra nullius, times land, belonging to no one, thereby negating the need for treaties or recognition, and effectively erasing them from collective memory. This pattern is not confined to ancient history. In the 20th century alone, entire cultures were obliterated within mere decades through warfare, propaganda, and rewritten schoolbooks. Conquerors were recast as explorers, cultural destruction as modernization, and monuments were erected to the victors, while the names of the vanquished were buried. The most poignant aspect, however, is not the silence in history books, but when an entire people begins to internalize the distorted version. When they are taught in schools that their ancestors were primitive, backward, or uncivilized. When they forsake their native languages. When they take pride in assimilating into the culture of their conquerors. At that juncture, history no longer needs to be burned. It has been supplanted from within. The beneficiaries are invariably the victors, who rewrite history in their own idiom, embed their values, and wield memory itself as a tool of control. Nevertheless, memory seldom truly perishes. It persists in legends, in folk songs, and in the unspoken grief of generations who have lost connection with their ancestral heritage. Contemporary historical narratives frequently celebrate explorers such as Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Ferdinand Magellan as pioneers who facilitated global interaction, uncovering unknown continents and catalyzing globalization. However, a critical pause reveals a crucial oversight. Was Columbus truly the first to discover the Americas, given that millions of people already inhabited the land? Do their prior existences not merit consideration? And what of the mariners and navigators from China, the Arab world, Africa, or even Northern Europe? Where do they fit into this approved timeline? The reality is that numerous explorers preceded Columbus. They are simply omitted from the mainstream narrative because their journeys did not align with the approved historical schema. Consider Zheng He, a Muslim admiral under China's Ming dynasty in the 15th century. He commanded vast fleets across the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as East Africa. His ships dwarfed those of Columbus, and his voyages spanned thousands of nautical miles, transporting scholars, goods, and even libraries. Zheng He's mission was diplomatic, focused on connection and knowledge exchange, not conquest. Yet, after the Ming court's political orientation shifted, all records of his monumental voyages were deliberately destroyed, a significant chapter in maritime history erased from the official account. Similarly, Arab navigators meticulously mapped stars and monsoon winds, establishing trade routes to Southeast Asia and East Africa centuries before European maritime expansion. They did not plant flags or claim discovery of already inhabited lands, and consequently, their contributions are often discounted. One might also consider the Mali Empire under Mansa Abu Bakr II, where some sources describe transatlantic expeditions preceding Columbus. These remain largely unacknowledged, perhaps due to racial biases embedded within historical interpretation. The Norse Vikings, for example, reached Newfoundland, Canada, establishing settlements and trading with local populations. Yet, their saga was relegated to the realm of folklore because it did not conform to the narrative of modern Western discovery. Only with archaeological confirmation of Viking settlements in North America did historians begin to accept their account, though Columbus often remains the focal point of the broader narrative. The peril in forgetting these explorers extends beyond merely losing their names. It involves losing the alternative modes of interaction they embodied. Most did not arrive with gunpowder, did not rename existing places, nor did they inscribe their legacy on maps with bloodshed. However, in a historical framework where conquest defines heroism, those who sought to connect rather than conquer are seldom celebrated. If one is not a conqueror, one is often excluded from the textbook. Therefore, the question arises, are we now sufficiently mature to re-evaluate these journeys, not through the lens of empire, but through the perspective of those who traveled to learn, to share, and to build bridges, not to burn them? Perhaps these are precisely the explorers the modern world most critically needs to remember. When discussing colonialism, the focus often centers on occupation, resource extraction, and the imposition of governance. However, a seldom addressed aspect, potentially more destructive than all others, is the systematic rewriting of history. For centuries, Western empires arrived in Africa, Asia, and Latin America not solely to appropriate resources, impose forced labor, or proselytize. They embarked on a far more insidious mission, to enlighten the past of peoples they unilaterally labeled as savages. This commenced with the minimization and culminated in the erasure of indigenous histories. In India, the Indus Valley Civilization, despite its sophisticated urban planning, advanced drainage systems, and mathematical achievements dating back over 4,000 years, was pejoratively dismissed as primitive. In Africa, claims were made that the pyramids of Sudan, the stone cities of Great Zimbabwe, or the libraries of Timbuktu could not possibly have been constructed by Black Africans, implying external intervention. In Latin America, the magnificent empires of the Inca, Maya, and Aztec were portrayed exclusively through a lens of barbarity and ritual violence, deliberately sidelining their extraordinary accomplishments in astronomy, architecture, and medicine. Colonial textbooks were not merely factually incorrect, they were intentionally distorted. This was not due to a dearth of evidence, but rather an underlying fear. If colonized peoples remembered their true heritage, they might cease to be submissive. Consequently, for over a century, children in India were taught more about British monarchs than their own ancestors. African children were instructed that Columbus discovered lands their forebears had inhabited for millennia. Native American children were forcibly enrolled in boarding schools, forbidden to speak their languages, and indoctrinated into believing their ancestors were wild and uncivilized. Even within archaeology, numerous discoveries were altered or suppressed simply because they contradicted the Eurocentric historical timeline. In the 19th and 20th centuries, European scholars described ancient Egyptians as white to circumvent, acknowledging that Africans had built one of humanity's greatest civilizations. Ancient Chinese and Arab maps were excluded from official archives. Indigenous languages were dismissed as unsophisticated and unworthy of preservation. The profound consequence was that billions of people grew up bereft of their ancestors' true history, and worse, were taught to be ashamed of it. For to dominate a populace across generations, chains are less effective than the inculcation of a belief that their ancestors achieved nothing great, that all progress originated externally, and that they should be grateful rather than inquisitive. Nevertheless, truth does not remain interred indefinitely. Today, a growing movement involves individuals scrutinizing banned records, studying archaic maps, and relearning ancestral tongues, revealing that their past was never inferior. It was simply recounted in the voice of the conqueror. If one assumes that individuals who profoundly shaped history are invariably memorialized in textbooks, a re-evaluation is warranted. History, as has been demonstrated, is not a neutral record. It is a contested terrain of remembrance where names are either preserved or effaced, not solely based on merit, but on their congruence with the narrative of those in power. Throughout millennia, countless individuals have contributed significantly to the development of entire civilizations. Yet, their names remain absent from school curricula. No monuments are erected in their honor, and no national holidays commemorate them. Their disappearance has been deliberate. Consider science, for instance. How many are familiar with Hypatia, the brilliant female philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician of Alexandria? Living in the 4th century, she taught publicly, presided over the city's most respected school of thought, and authored works on geometry, physics, and astronomy. However, because she was a woman and not a Christian, she was branded a witch, viciously assassinated by a zealous populace in the streets, and her writings were destroyed. Today, she is mentioned only faintly, often as a tragic historical footnote. Similarly, consider Ibn al-Haytham, the 10th century Arab scientist who laid fundamental groundwork for the scientific method. He conducted pioneering studies in optics, vision, and light centuries before Europe's scientific revolution. Yet, in most modern physics courses, his name is scarcely acknowledged, not due to a lack of importance, but because his contributions do not fit the prevailing Western-centric narrative. Likewise, Wang Zhenyi, an 18th century Chinese female astronomer who meticulously constructed models of solar eclipses, authored mathematical textbooks, and developed theories ahead of her time, is omitted from mainstream history for not conforming to the expectations of her feudal era. In the realm of politics, numerous reformers courageously challenged injustice and endeavored to establish more equitable societies. However, because their efforts did not serve the interests of empires, they were vilified, exiled, or simply erased. Even many renowned inventions attributed to celebrated figures may not have originated with them. Enslaved black inventors created machinery, Arab craftsmen designed architectural marvels, and women formulated life-saving medicines. Yet, their innovations were often credited to more acceptable names. And just like that, history saw a change of ownership not merely of lands, but of legacies. The core question, therefore, is not merely how many great individuals have been forgotten, but why times it was deemed necessary to forget them. Perhaps they challenged the established order. Perhaps they blurred the rigid distinctions between civilized and savage, distinctions that empires required to justify their dominance. Perhaps they were women, people of color, indigenous, or outsiders. When such names are erased, humanity loses more than a few stories. It loses the capacity to envision an alternative world, a world where scientific endeavor is not monopolized, where intelligence is not judged by ethnicity or gender, and where truth requires no official sanction to be believed. One might ponder the unsettling possibility that we are operating within an incorrect chronological framework. What if the entire historical timeline we have been taught is not merely flawed, but fundamentally inaccurate? This is not unsubstantiated conjecture. For over a century, a growing body of independent researchers, alternative archaeologists, and unconventional historians have been questioning the very chronology of human civilization. They do not dispute the existence of ancient cultures, but rather challenge times when times they existed, and in times what order asterisk. One of the most controversial propositions is the phantom time hypothesis, advanced by German historian Heribert Illig in the 1000 990 seconds. Illig posits that nearly 300 years of European history, specifically from 614 to 911 AD, may never have occurred. He argues these centuries were fabricated by powerful figures, most notably Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II, to position themselves at the prestigious symbolic milestone of the first millennium. The alleged consequence is that dozens of royal dynasties, documents, and architectural records may have been falsely dated, advancing the entire human timeline by nearly 3 centuries. While audacious, Illig and other researchers present unsettling clues. A scarcity of solid archaeological evidence for many key events during the 614 to 911 AD period. Architecture and art from the so-called Dark Ages exhibiting minimal progression, as if time had indeed stood still, and ancient calendar systems repeatedly modified, leaving behind perplexing lacunae and inconsistencies that remain unresolved. Furthermore, some scholars point to ancient megalithic sites such as the Egyptian pyramids, the stone platform of Baalbek, and the fortress of Puma Punku, suggesting they may be thousands of years older than conventionally believed. Take Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, for instance, a massive, sophisticated temple complex dated to at least 11,000 years ago, predating agriculture, writing, and the recognized dawn of civilization itself. Its very existence has compelled archaeologists to fundamentally rethink the entire narrative of human social evolution. If Göbekli Tepe was real, and constructed by an advanced, organized society, then perhaps even older civilizations once thrived and were subsequently erased from human memory. Why then would our timelines be so profoundly mistaken? Was it a technical error, a mere lack of evidence, or, more disturbingly, was it intentional? For when power seeks to control memory, it not only rewrites the story, but it also reconfigures time itself. Controlling the timeline means controlling the sequence of achievements. It allows one to dictate what preceded what, framing the past in a manner that glorifies some and expunges others. This is precisely how an earlier culture can be labeled primitive, while later ones are hailed as advanced. In this manner, the very concepts of who is civilized and who is savage become entrenched. Therefore, if it were not actually the year 2025, but perhaps 1725, or if human civilization did not commence 6,000 years ago, as textbooks assert, but perhaps 30,000 years ago, would one dare to question not just history, but the very foundation of our self-understanding? For centuries, the enigmas of history were obscured by convenient excuses, insufficient evidence, lost manuscripts, undeciphered scripts, and unverifiable claims. However, this landscape is transforming with unprecedented speed. Artificial intelligence, in conjunction with digitization technologies, is converting what was once considered irretrievably lost into something suddenly within reach. No longer do centuries of painstaking research suffice. Mere hours of data processing can now yield profound insights from charred scrolls, broken stones, and extinct languages. The outcome is not merely novel knowledge, but the re-illumination of ancient truths. Consider 2023, when researchers employed AI to decode the ancient scrolls of Herculaneum, a city buried alongside Pompeii by a volcanic eruption. For centuries, these carbonized scrolls were deemed unreadable. Yet, through deep learning algorithms, word by word, line by line, lost philosophical texts and ideas entirely absent from mainstream history began to emerge. Similarly, AI is now cross-referencing ancient maps with satellite imagery, revealing architectural patterns concealed beneath the Amazon jungle, the Sahara Desert, or the floor of the Mediterranean Sea. These structures, absent from historical records, may belong to civilizations long erased from memory. AI is also comparing ancient texts across disparate civilizations, uncovering striking similarities previously overlooked by academic circles, prompting more profound inquiries. Could a global knowledge system, a shared network of wisdom, have existed long before the internet, oceanic voyages, or even maps? In pioneering projects, AI is being trained on millions of archaeological and historical records to predict missing patterns, such as the potential locations of undiscovered cities, or the likelihood of unnamed civilizations having once flourished. Perhaps the most potent attribute of AI is its inherent lack of historical bias. It remains loyal to no ideology, nation, or religion. It simply processes data, exposing what has been missed or deliberately ignored. For many, this represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a chance to revisit history, unfiltered by empire, dogma, or curriculum. Yet, some remain uneasy. If AI begins to reveal too much, will certain powers intervene to suppress the data, restrict the algorithms, or dictate the outcomes? After all, if history is a tool of power, then any tool that rewrites history poses an existential threat to that power. Indications of this resistance are already apparent. Some research projects have lost funding, incredible findings have been excluded from official publications, and controversial discoveries are summarily dismissed as conspiracy theories. Thus, the question transcends what AI can help us uncover. It becomes whether society will permit the truth to surface once it no longer serves the powerful. It is a common observation that each generation is instructed that history is a complete and settled domain. Primitive peoples inhabited caves, followed by agriculture, then empires, and all else is a closed book. However, by examining the underlying assumptions, a disquieting realization emerges. Modern education is not a mirror of truth, but rather a filter of memory, designed to preserve only that which serves the current order. For instance, why are students meticulously taught about Roman conquests, Napoleon, or the World Wars, yet remain largely ignorant of the rich civilizations of Africa, the scholars of the Arab world, or the ancient scientists of the East? Why is ancient history consistently presented along a linear timeline, with the West inevitably portrayed as the apex of human achievement? Why are narratives like Tartaria, Lemuria, or even well-documented outlier discoveries dismissed as myths, regardless of accumulating evidence? The issue is not a deficit of information. Records, artifacts, and data exist. The core problem is that the system was not constructed to foster critical inquiry. It was designed to offer comfort, to ensure a widespread belief in a singular version of the story, not because it is inherently correct, but because it is stable. When history is presented as a fixed sequence of indisputable events, it stifles curiosity and inhibits critical questioning, thereby preserving existing power structures. Modern education frequently reduces monumental revolutions to a single line in a textbook, ignores erased figures, and leaves entire civilizations unexamined, often for political expediency. Digital era discoveries are dismissed for lacking scholarly consensus. But then, one must ask, who generates this consensus? Who authors the textbooks? Who devises the standardized tests? Who determines what is deemed too controversial to teach? One might dismiss the past as irrelevant to the present. Yet, the truth is that the way history is taught fundamentally defines humanity itself. If one is instructed that ancestors merely hunted and feared thunderstorms, one may never question the extraordinary potential within oneself. If one believes that all progress originated elsewhere, one remains perpetually a receiver, never a creator. This, indeed, is the most profound purpose of perpetuating distorted history in education. Not to compel belief in a falsehood, but to erode belief in oneself. Imagine residing within a magnificent edifice, everything appearing perfectly stable, until a whisper suggests, the foundation of this house was once an ancient sacred site, but it was leveled and buried. Would one continue to rest peacefully, or would an urge arise to examine every brick, every corner, questioning what truths might be concealed? History operates similarly. As we synthesize the disparate elements uncovered throughout this exploration, forgotten civilizations, suspicious timelines, incinerated knowledge, vanished figures, and an educational system that selectively curates memory, a singular question naturally emerges. Are we living within an edited version of history? A version where glorious eras are dismissed as myths, centuries of violence are veiled behind terms like enlightenment, discovery, or civilization, where ancient cultures are pruned and neatly arranged into a timeline far too simplistic to be credible, and where transcontinental, transgenerational connections are severed, as if humanity never shared a collective memory. It is crucial to recall that history is not merely what occurred. It is how times we choose to narrate what occurred, and that narration invariably reflects the power dynamics shaping the present. When an empire collapses, history is rewritten. When a religion ascends, the narrative is revised. When a political system takes hold, textbooks are replaced, and occasionally, an entire people's memory is overwritten with imagery they never created. The consequence is that we are raised within a curated narrative, a version deemed safe, a version deemed profitable, a version where the raw truth has been excised, blurred, or supplanted. Worse, when this version is reiterated across generations, it begins to solidify as the sole reality. We forget the missing pieces. We cease to question the inexplicable gaps. We lose the intuition that we may have been severed from our deepest roots. Yet truth, however long it remains buried, inevitably finds its way through the cracks. It may reside in a forgotten map, a ruin beneath the sands, an undeciphered script, or even in the collective unconscious dreams of a lost golden age that everyone somehow remembers without explicit instruction. As more individuals begin to question rather than merely accept, that edited version of history begins to destabilize, not through rebellion, but through the reawakening of memory. Ultimately, what constitutes history? Is it an objective chain of events, or a mirror of collective memory, obscured by the dust of time? Is it what has been recorded, or what has been time's chosen times to be recorded? We have traversed through layers of time, uncovering fragments that someone once hoped would be forgotten civilizations, incinerated manuscripts, erased names. What has been revealed are indications of a far grander narrative, deeper, more intricate, and at times fundamentally divergent from what was taught. The deeper aspects of this story, however, reside not in texts, but within the individual. History does not merely exist in textbooks. It resides in how we remember, how we retell it, and the choices we make consequently. Should one harbor an intrinsic sense that something is amiss, or question why profound inquiries are seldom posed in educational settings, or perceive that crucial pieces remain absent, then one may well be part of a generation undergoing a reawakening. This journey invites continued reflection on the narratives that define our past and present.